In this episode, we've got a lot to cover, looking at Lindale Yard through JMRI.
Oh, not more JMRI.
Honestly, this will be less than a minute.
We go prototype and talk Montana rail link. We look at listen and adjust Rapido's SW1200. And we rail fan an op session. So kick back, roll an axle, and maybe you'll accidentally learn something on this episode of the GN 1970.
70s. Today we'll take a look at a Great Northern GP9 number 910 pulling into Lindale Yard. As this is not a common occurrence within Lindale Yard, we'll take a look at a brief overview of what Lindale has to offer.
Looking at Lindale Yard through JMRI.
Oh, not more JMRI.
Honestly, this will be less than a minute.
Just to give you an idea of what I see on the back end to know what kind of capacity I'm going to see at the end of a session. Just as an example, Lindale Yard's capacity is 1630. 1023 is currently being used, which is roughly 21 cars. And in the next session, it's going to see 19 of those cars leave, but 26 cars are going to come in. So I know it's going to increase in capacity just slightly. I can then look at the industries and see how they're going to work. 760, it's at 604 of current use, and it has 12 cars currently in the North Industries, and 3 of those will get picked up and 2 new ones will get set out. Same with the East. The East has 460 of overall length. It has 430 currently being used, which is 9 cars currently sitting there. 5 will get picked up and 2 will get set out. So that's just a nice little snapshot to be able to see exactly what goes into trains that are coming and going, but I can look at an overall system and get an idea of,
Is it going to see a lot of traffic?
Is it going to increase or is it going to decrease?
just by looking at the numbers.
Minutes up.
You can always learn a little.
By looking at the real deal.
Well, here's a shot brought to us by fellow railroad enthusiast Josh. He ended up pointing out this shot is at milepost 83, which is just outside of Boston on the CSX Main. The car is likely to be interchanged with the CSX from the New England Central Railroad after being delivered to a feed mill in either Connecticut or Vermont. We are looking at a Pullman Standard 4750, and did the Sioux Line have a lot of these?
They had just over 1,000 some.
Well, this was in the first lot that was done. They had a lot of 100 built in 1276, which is kind of cool to see. Something with still Sioux Line paint on it, as well as the original Sioux Line number. It just has new reporting marks.
Kind of cool. Thanks for sending, Josh.
In 1969, the Burlington Northern merger was becoming a reality, and the merger candidates started working together toward a unified image. Above is the first group of NP cars to wear the new Cascade Green scheme with the more bold, rounded sans serif typeface, later adopted by the BN. Can you identify the size of this freshly painted Pullman Standard hopper? Is it A, 4427, B, 4650, C, 4740, or D, 4750? We'll find out later in this episode.
Where do you come up with these questions? I have a better chance guessing how many ounces are left in a half-drink can of pop.
And since we're rail fanning around the country, we joined fellow modeler Mike out in Bonita, Montana. He checks out the Boeing train. It's kind of cool to see some of these unique loads. These cars are actually going to be heading towards
Mukilteo,
Washington, to the Boeing plant. Here's a unique bird that Mike caught in Havre, Montana. It's the 25th anniversary BNSF paint scheme that, well, they stuck a bunch of stickers on the side of one of their locomotives. Hooray! I wish they would have done each of the individual schemes. Instead, they just did 10 of these particular locomotives and sent them around the system, and, well, Mike caught one. Well, here we are at the GN depot. Well, it's actually the BNSF depot, but it's kind of cool. They took off the BNSF sign to expose Great Northern Railway. Mike, our photographer, actually used to work here from 1980 to 1985, and again, a short little stint in 98. And speaking of former employees, if you didn't see the tour that Gary Nelson gave us through the Wilmer Depot, you can pop over and check the video section to find this special edition clip. Here's a fun little fact for the Havre Depot, which is the sister to the Wilmer Depot. The second floor is beige brick, and the first floor is dark red. The reason for that was the first floor was built in the early 20th century as a single-level depot. And around the same time the Wilmer Depot was built, the GN added a second story to the Havre Depot.
Kind of cool.
Little interesting fact.
Something also that's a little interesting are these cantilever signals. They're an NP signal, and I believe this is near Plains, Montana.
I threw this one in for Colin. He's a signal guy.
In the last few shots we'll look at from Mike were the Montana Rail Link here at Milan Pass. It's no longer going to be Montana Rail Link, as we know the BNSF is going to be taking over those areas of operations, but it was still cool to be able to see Montana Rail Link power, especially these type of cool paint schemes. These were our first responders paint schemes that the Montana Rail Link had done. This is in Elliston, Montana. And it doesn't get much more fitting than to have a work train to close us out here at Dixon, Montana.
Montana Rail Link, it was good to know you.
I didn't know you knew Montana Rail Link.
All right, I just wanted to give you a real quick listen. This is a Rapido right out of the box, SW1200, to give you an idea of volume. Setting up for the operating session, I changed it from address 3 to 29, but give this a listen. Sounds pretty good. It feels like we're standing by a real locomotive. So just so you're aware, this is set to number, I think it's CD63. It's set to 192. If I, on the throttle here, I'm just going to change this program 63. I'm going to bring it down to where we normally are, and that's around 40. Hit enter. Just to give you an idea, I'm just going to hit it with the mic on it. So that's an adjustment that we like as far as volume, not to have it at the factory.
192.
We brought it down to 40. And even this might even still be a little bit loud, but we want to be able to still hear the locomotive when it's working. I might drop it down to 30. But just to give you an idea of an update that you can do to make your operations a little more sane is not have your volume blasting wide open. It should be noted, if you're into sound, you should at least set your volumes to a tolerable level, because after a while, it will drive you nuts.
Hey, can somebody ring that bell?
If you ring the bell, I'll ring your bell. Getting to know the GN in 1970. Jobs for Ops. Lindale Yard.
We're just going to take a brief look at Lindale Yard as far as the job is concerned. Lindale itself is a smaller yard. The guys that have ran this job have always really liked it. You do have your Lindale trim, and the trim takes care of the back tracks from Uniroyal all the way down to Metalmatic. So these industries on this back, you do have to cross the main, get permission from the dispatcher to come into this area.
Can I get into this area?
Service all the cars that you can see, as well as Metalmatic here in the foreground. We consider that the Lindale North trim. The industries east of Lindale are also part of what is considered the Lindale trim. The Lindale East trim is just off to the right here. So these industries, General Mills, the industries you're seeing in the foreground, Minneapolis Equipment, Mueller Technologies, and then Simon Scrap, which is just in the distance here. Oh, and of course the team track that's located here on the belly track. So that job is handled by the Lindale Yard Master. The tracks you see in the distance with the Sioux Line and the Chicago Northwestern, those are interchange jobs that run to Union.
You have nothing to do with them.
But coming back around into Lindale itself, this guy's responsibility is solely to be able to handle the cars for those trim jobs, as well as handle any cars that are coming up from the hutch line. There is a hutch job that comes into here, and that job is going to be collecting any hutch cars. But outside of that, the Lindale job itself is kind of a fun, simple one to run. And it, in a nutshell, is just to handle the Lindale trim north and the Lindale trim east, as well as any trains that are running on that current day as far as the session is scheduled. It could be train 81, it could be train 35. You don't know what's coming at you, but there is a yard switch list for the crew to look at. All right, so this is Lindale Yard. It is one of the favorite jobs on the railroad if you get the opportunity to run it. It's definitely one that has its challenges. You work across the north, so you got to get across the main, But at the same time, it's definitely a fun gig to have, so if you can get it, go ahead and jump on this job.
Well, let's get an answer to this ridiculous question.
Usually if you don't know the answer, you just guess C.
If you did, you'd be correct. It was the 4740. A good way to identify the difference between the two? Well, you count the number of ribs. A 4740 had 16, while the 4750 had 18.
Boy, that's some irrelevant information that I'll never remember. Huh, thanks for pointing it out.
Modeler Highlights with Joe Binish, operating Central of Minnesota.
Here we are at the Central of Minnesota. This SD9 awaits a green signal. The railroad is owned by Mr. Joe Binish.
Hello.
This railroad has a lot of nice rolling stock and structures.
Hey, that tower looks familiar.
I think we've got to go.
This here is the Sampson Memorial Tower that William tried to wipe out. I was able to fix it and even improved it a bit, so it's all right. William, you'll get invited back.
Okay. Can you repeat the part of the stuff where you said all about the things?
It's all right. William, you'll get invited back. You'll get invited back. You'll get invited back.
Well, you got to be careful what you wish for, Mr. Binish. You did bring us back, and we've been back a few times since this tower was knocked to the ground.
And the lesson learned, don't wear a hooded sweatshirt to a layout tour.
On this day, we ran the railroad with 6 operators, not including Joe. He does use a car card system, which works real well. The job I had on this particular day was the 3rd Street job, which is on the left-hand side of your screen. We'll take a look at some footage.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
One neat thing about this particular railroad are these alley jobs. There are actually 2 on the railroad, so if you do like switching, you don't go,
Oh, that guy got the good job.
because 3rd Street and 4th Street are both fun to switch.
Let reality slip away. And I can hear the children crying. And I can hear the children crying.
One thing to pick up on is the resin car kits that are custom built and painted, as well as locomotives. Joe does a very nice job detailing things. You might even find yourself slightly distracted by rail fanning the rail sides, just checking out the equipment and stuff that Joe has done, because it is quite impressive.
Can't stop the pain from taking me down now. Got no answer to it all.
If you'd like to see more of this railroad, Joe does give a tour of the railroad within this channel. You can find the video under Layout Tours.
But I don't know what went wrong. Why am I sorry to say?
If you want to hear more from Joe, he occasionally pops up on the Crossing Gate podcast that can be found on any of your favorite podcast platforms.
When will I see you again?
A big thanks to Joe for having us out for this operating session. As you can see, this is what model railroading is all about. In a sense, you're operating 3-dimensional art. How cool is that? We'll close this out with one last scene.
Can't stop the pain. Don't look back. I can't find my way. Don't look back. Guess I really found the answer. I can see it's not.
Remember to please like, tag, share, and follow, as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel.
And if you'd like to see the hobby grow, a simple click goes a long way.
Thanks for watching.
You done shoot about as good as you model.
All right, here's a question being answered for a fellow named Tag. Is the curmudgeon my dad? Well, indirectly, he just might be. You figure it out. Thanks for the question, Tag. Colin's out.
Hopefully you enjoyed the content of this episode. If you want to see more, you can check out more episodes of the GN 1970 as well as Sue the Milwaukee Road. You can see a tour of the GN 1970 and even a few other layout tours. Nonetheless, check out the content and hopefully you enjoy that as well as future episodes. Thanks for watching.